Hey there, this is Guido Schnabel at Clemson University, and I'm going to be talking about gray mold and anthracnose diseases in strawberries. For disease management of strawberries, what drives the spray program is typically anthracnose and gray mold in particular. And for managing those diseases, I think we need to apply an integrated approach for disease management. It starts with the planting of clean plants. Find a nursery source that has reliably delivered clean plants because those have much less disease on them. Both anthracnose and the gray mold pathogen can cling on those transplants and cause disease later on. So the healthier the plants are looking, the better it is. Now, there is something that you can do to sanitize those plants, and we're going to talk about effective tips in a moment. Manage row covers. As spring advances, make sure that your plants are not under the row cover when the temperature rises, and make sure that you prevent a humid environment under the row covers that would encourage a explosive development of those diseases under the row cover. Practice sanitation. The reason why we do this is we want to reduce the inoculum level or the number of infectious spores in the field. We can do this by keeping away from inoculum sources. Very recent research has shown that the causal organism of anthracnose, Cultivars acutatum, can actually linger on forest trees and shrubs just on the surface, and from there enter a strawberry field. So the farther away you are from forest or from a hedgerow or from shrubs, the better. Remove diseased fruit and dead foliage and follow up with a Captan or Thyrame application. That's a good sanitation practice. And the reason why we want to follow up with a fungicide application is we are basically disturbing the canopy of the plants. We are spreading inoculum around by removing dead leaves and infected strawberries. And we want to make sure that those inoculum sources are taken care of. Very important is to do this when the weather is dry, because wet weather or wet plants will encourage the fungus to be spread even worse. So the workers work the plants, and under wet weather, the clingy spores, specifically of Cultivars acutatum, the anthracnose pathogen, will spread more easily. So do sanitation when the weather is dry. Harvest clean fields first, and then move to problem fields. Optimize your spray program or your fungicide program for efficacy and for resistance management. And we're going to talk about resistance management in a little bit much more. And consider on-farm testing of anthracnose-tolerant cultivars. Unfortunately, we don't have any cultivars that are tolerant or resistant to gray mold, but a lot of the breeding programs are starting to develop cultivars that are resistant to the anthracnose disease. And I'm going to be presenting some of those cultivars here in a little bit. So let's start with gray mold. And so I'm not going to talk about biology very much because that is covered in the videos that I mentioned earlier. Gray mold sort of drives the spray program. You can count on this disease every year. It's there, and there's nothing we can do to get rid of it, because it not only comes in with the transplants, but it also does come in with from weeds and from shrubs and forest land, because it's what we call a ubiquitous fungus. It can live and infect many different plants. Fungicide resistance is the main issue, and we're going to talk about this in a little while. And optimize the spray program for efficacy and resistance management. Now, down here, I've put a few pictures just to illustrate how easily those spores actually can be picked up by wind and be spread. So what you see on a strawberry here is this gray fuzzy stuff. If you zoom in with a microscope, you can easily see that it's easily removable from the strawberry surface. And so wind can just pick up those spores, and they're really tiny. This is also a picture taken under the microscope. They're roundish, those spores. They can be picked up by wind and rain and spread very easily. So with regard to chemical control, I think it's important to implement not only efficacious fungicides, but also to know a lot about resistance and resistance management. We've done quite a few years of resistance monitoring in southeastern or eastern states, many eastern states actually. And this slide sort of gives you an overview of what we found over the last 7-8 years. With regard to FRAC1, Topsin M would be a good representative of FRAC1. We saw that resistance was at very high level even when we began monitoring in 2011. And that level of resistance remained at a very high level over the years that we did the monitoring. So a lot of resistance is out there to FRAC1. There's also a lot of resistance out there to FRAC11, and those are represented by Cabrio, Abound, Evito, and Flint Extra. Now that resistance has sort of emerged and developed over time, and it has now been found to be at about 70%, and it's just lingering there at 70%. So you can rest assured that you have probably resistance to the FRAC 11s already in your field. It's there to stay. There's no fitness penalties with regard to resistance. It looks a little better for other chemicals, including FRAC 17, and a representative would be Elevate. And here we found that really, although early on in 2011 and 12, we had very low levels, the level increased to about 30%, but then stayed at 30%. And I think the reason why it stayed at 30% is that we all are doing a good job rotating chemicals. And that makes it very difficult for the fungus to continue its quest to become even more resistant and develop resistance at higher frequency to a certain chemical. Then FRAC 7, a very important FRAC group represented by Kenja and Fontellus. Here we found that actually the resistance level is still fairly low, which is good news. So that's very good news. Then we have Scala, represented by FRAC 9. And here we found that over the years, resistance levels have increased, but sort of stay at the 30% mark, just like with Elevate. So something we can work with. Resistance is there, but it's at a fairly low level. Rovaral FRAC 2 is fairly low, resistance levels anywhere between 10 and 20% in southeastern and eastern fields. The reason for that is probably because we only use it once, maybe twice per year. Most people use it only once before bloom. And then we've got the combination products, Switch and Miravis Prime. The main ingredient of those combination products is the FRAC 12 fludeoxonil. And resistance to fludeoxonil is very low. It's only at the 0 to 5% level. In some years, we weren't able to find any resistance out there. So that is really good news. And the fact that those compounds, Switch and Miravis Prime, come as a premixture will help prevent the fungus from continuing its quest to develop higher frequency of resistance to fludeoxonil. So that's good news too, especially because the combination partner for Switch is also something where resistance hasn't developed very, very much. As you can see here, 9 plus 12 is Switch, and the 9 component is in the 20 to 30% level. Miravis Prime, the mixing partner is 7. If you look over here, 7, that's even better than 9. Resistance levels are even lower than that, than 9. So we've got some really good products out there that we can use. Which of those compounds actually need mixing partners? And because we do see some some resistance levels up to 30%. I do believe that we do need mixing partners for Elevate, for Kenja, Fontellus, for Scala, and for Roveral. Don't apply those by themselves. Always add maybe Captain or Thyram to those products. You might be also very familiar with Pristine, Marivon, and Luna Sensation. Those are also mixing premixtures of 7 and 11 frac codes. 7 we already talked about. 11 we also talked about. The disadvantage here is that the frac 11, as you can see over here, that is virtually not effective anymore. So frac 7 in this premixture is basically all by itself, unprotected. And it's up to you to decide if you want to spray a 7-11 or just a 7. So if the 11 doesn't help the 7 to manage resistance, why would you spray the 11 for nothing if it doesn't work for anything? Now 11 does have efficacy against anthracnose, but resistance is a problem there as well. So I think if your major target is botrytis and you don't see anthracnose in the field, use the 7s with a combination partner that's, from a resistance management standpoint, a much smarter choice. You also have the choice to spray Inspire Super. Inspire Super is a mixture of frac 3, which I haven't covered here, and frac 9. Frac 3 is not historically a botryticide, but this particular chemical, difenoconazole, is quite effective against botrytis as well as the anthracnose disease fungus. And so in combination with 9, it makes it actually a pretty good combination that I also highly recommend. So just to summarize all of this stuff, gray mold has become resistant to thiophanate methyl frac 1. It has become resistant to strobilurin fungicides or frac 11s, and that weakens Pristine, Luna, Sensation, and Marivon. So you might want to think about not wasting your combination product and rather use a 7 standalone with a combination partner, Captain or Thyram. Then frac 2, 7, 9, and 17. And if you want to know what those are, please consult either the spray guide or the smartphone app, My IPM. You can sort the interactive table very easily, and then you can see what stands behind those 2, 7, 9, and 17 frac codes. Those are still working fine up to a maximum of 30% resistance frequency, but they have to be used with a protectant. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about anthracnose. And this is a picture that shows an anthracnose-stricken strawberry. And in contrast to botrytis, where there's this fuzzy stuff on top that can easily be picked up by wind, the spores are more gooey and stick to each other. And as a result, those spores cannot be picked up by wind. They actually spread through rain splash, or when workers work the plants through sanitation. So that's one of the reasons why when the plants are wet, spread is much more easily done with this particular fungus. This is a table that I put together, and I think it's also published now in the new spray guide. I consulted with many of the breeding programs and listed sort of the cultivars that are resistant or medium resistant to anthracnose disease. So those are the cultivars over here on the left. Those are the breeding programs that I consulted, and that's the combined result, the combined assessment of those cultivars. For example, Pelican, Flavorfest, Prada, they are considered to be resistant to anthracnose disease, as well as some of those Florida cultivars, Winter Dawn, Sweet Sensation. Then we've got some that were rated a little differently depending on which breeding program you ask. Sometimes they were rated as medium resistant, other times they were rated as resistant. Those are Dover, Florida Radiance, and Winter Star. And then we have got some that have some tolerance to the disease, but they still get it if disease pressure is high. Those are Carmen, Ruby Gem, Florida Brilliant, Sweet Charlie, and Ovation. Some of those cultivars are already being used in North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Georgia, which I have indicated here on the right-hand side. And if you have experience with those cultivars, please let me know, and I would add this to this table for everybody to share. If you think that a certain cultivar is suitable for your conditions in your state, let me know. That is very valuable information. But other, there might be some cultivars that are not suitable, and it's up to you to try those maybe in just a few rows and see if they would work for you. Do they meet the demand of your clientele? With regard to dips, we talked about planting clean plants. So there's one thing you can do, and that's dipping your cutoffs or your bare root plants. And I like to show this particular study from 2016, 2017, because it brings the point across that we have a couple of really good chemicals that you can use to dip the plants and get some action against anthracnose and against gray mold. In this particular trial, in the untreated control, we had 16% anthracnose. But if we dipped the plants in switch, and again, that's a study actually from Florida. So if the Florida scientists, when they use switch, they lowered the disease incidence to 1.2%. So it's an enormous reduction of disease when switch was used. The other really good compound I'm very excited about is Zivion. Active ingredient is natamycin. That only came to the market maybe last year, a couple of years ago in Florida, but last year we had it registered in more states. Zivion is very effective, especially if you apply it indoors, away from sunlight, because the formulation that it's currently in doesn't protect from UV degradation. So if you do the dipping indoors, you get, in this particular study, the scientists didn't get any disease, whereas when the dip was done in the field, there was a little bit of disease that they could measure. And again, active ingredient is natamycin. That's another study that was published in a peer-reviewed journal article in 2018, showing that Zivion and Switch worked against the natural strain of anthracnose, but also against strains that are resistant to FRAC 11s, the strobilurin fungicides. So that's really good to know. These two compounds, they work against the wild type and also the mutated strain, which is good news. The natamycin active ingredient is sold as natamycin trade name. So it's called natamycin L or Zivion S. It's currently registered in Florida, California, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. And I'm hoping that we will have it registered in more states very soon. It is active against anthracnose and gray mold, but it also does have efficacy against some of those other soil-borne diseases, including fusarium wilt and charcoal rot. If you're interested in using it next season, call or contact John Farragher at dsm.com. Again, John Farragher at dsm.com. He will set you up with product. I personally don't have experience with natamycin dips with regard to strawberries, but we are working with this product on other crops. With my colleague Jim Faust and our student Melissa Munoz, we have determined that natamycin works really well against botrytis. And we have done this on petunia flowers. So those top flowers over here were treated with natamycin, and they were inoculated with botrytis spores, kept under conditions that are highly suitable for botrytis infection, and they stayed healthy, whereas other treatments failed, including calcium treatments, Botrytis protector. So those biological agents that we tried, they didn't do anything. But natamycin did a good job. Again, evidence that netamycin not only works against anthracnose, but also against gray mold. You can't spray it, but you can use it as a dip. It's not registered as an aerial spray. I would encourage you to learn more about disease management of strawberry using the Southeastern Spray Guide. You can find that one at www.smallfruits.org. I also encourage you to download the MyIPM smartphone app, which is maintained by many different specialists, and it is meant to complement the spray guide and provide information that you might not find in the spray guide, such as disease identification tools, lots of high quality, high resolution pictures. There's some audio in there, and there are active ingredients and trade names in interactive tables. Those active ingredients and trade names are color coded and they're numbered, and you can easily sort them and get an overview of what is actually available for you. So I like the MyIPM smartphone app for that particular reason, but there's much more in there as well. Also, please check out the video channel by Madeline Dowling. She's doing all these cool documentaries about botrytis and anthracnose and other things. So check out her Vimeo channel at vimeo.com channels phytographics. This is the MyIPM interactive table for anthracnose, and I'm showing this just to illustrate how easy it is to get an overview of what is actually working against anthracnose disease, for example. If you go to the active ingredient, you go to the anthracnose, and then you go to the active ingredient table, and you push the FRAC code button, you can sort all of those active ingredients. And you can easily see then that a lot of those compounds contain FRAC 11s. Those are the strobilurin fungicides. And a lot of those active ingredients have the same mode of action. So you got to be careful when you rotate active ingredients that you don't spray anything that has the same FRAC code in it. So rotate different numbers to make sure that you don't increase the frequency of resistance in your field. And that's easily seen in those tables. We have a new product out there called Miravis Prime, and I think it's a sister product sort of to Switch, and Switch is a very popular product because of its efficacy and because it's working against gray mold and Switch. I'm sorry, it works against gray mold and anthracnose. And that's the same is true for Miravis Prime as well. So it works against gray mold, powdery mildew, and the anthracnose fungus. It is a combination product between PD-flumethophan, which is FRAC 7, and fludeoxonil, which is FRAC 12. Resistance management is hugely important, and we're going to talk about this in particular in this slide. So again, you've got your Miravis Prime, a combination product, highly effective. But it does have some label restrictions. You can only use it twice if you apply it at the high rate, or 3 times if you apply it at the low rate. Switch you can apply up to 4 times, but that doesn't mean that you can use Miravis Prime twice and Switch 4 times, because the label says do not use any of those active ingredients in Miravis Prime or Switch more than 4 times per season. So you can use Miravis Prime twice and Switch twice, or you can use Switch 4 times, but then you can't use Miravis Prime again. So those are your choices. My preference would be you buy both products and you use them twice per season, but you rotate them with other options to make sure you don't spray two active ingredients with the same mode of action one after another. This is sort of a spray guide that I've assembled for you. It's assuming low disease pressure and high disease pressure. Low disease pressure on the left, high disease pressure on the right. And here are the choices that I would recommend for you to use under low disease and high disease pressure. So low disease pressure, you're totally fine to just use Thyrane by itself, to just use polyoxin D by itself, or Captan by itself. Depending on the season, Thyrane is a good product to be used early season. Captan is a very good product to be used later in the season. Captan has an edge on anthracnose disease, whereas Thyram has an edge on gray mold disease, but they're both active against both diseases. So that's under low disease pressure, dry weather, no major rain events in the forecast. But if that changes and you're expecting a lot of humidity and moisture, then you need to actually work with combination products, or you need to combine Thyram or Captan with something else like Roveral early season. You can do this one time. You can combine Thyram or Captan with Kenja or Frontalis. You can apply that 3 times maximum per season. Or you can choose to combine Thyram or Captan with Elevate 2 times per season, or you can use Mirvis Prime as a solo product twice, Inspire Super as a solo product 4 times, Switch as a solo product 2 times. So you can pick from those options and make sure that you rotate. And in summary, I need to emphasize that using an integrated approach to control fruit diseases is the best you can do for managing your disease pressure. Again, it starts with the clean plants. Make sure you buy from a reliable nursery. I would also sanitize with those dips, manage your row covers, practice sanitation, make sure that you're spraying something that actually works, and make sure that you are implementing resistance management by rotating chemistries. And consider those anthracnose-tolerant cultivars. Try them out in a few rows and see how they're working for you. It would certainly make your life much easier if you grew a cultivar that will help you with disease management by resisting the fungus naturally, that will aid your chemical uh, approach tremendously. So with this, I couldn't do it without all the people in the lab, my students and postdocs and technicians. So thank you, everybody. And with that, I hope that you have a great season, and I'm always available for your questions. And I look forward to getting them and answering them. Thank you so much.